Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology, and today we are going to take a look at the upcoming Mars Cazimi. This is the conjunction between Mars and the Sun that is about to happen in the late degrees of Scorpio. We're going to take a look at this in terms of how it works, in case you don't know what a Cazimi is. And we're going to talk about, more broadly speaking, the entire synodic cycle of Mars and the Sun, so you can put that Cazimi into context. So that'll be our how it works section. And then we're going to talk about what makes this one special. It's very interesting that Mars is in its own chariot, meaning Mars is in the sign of its own rulership. And we're going to look back on the last cycle up till now for reflection, and then talk about some of the signatures around this Cazimi that make it pretty unique. And hopefully this in total will help you prepare for the upcoming conjunction. So that's our goal for today. Before we get into it, as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're new to the channel, we really appreciate your being here and hope that you will enjoy the content you find on the channel. You can always share a story of your own from the transits that we're exploring in the comment section. We use the hashtag grabbed, and then we ask people to put in the name of the transit and the story they have to share, and we occasionally collect those stories. We recently did a nice storytelling episode, so if you have one to share, please feel free. You could also email us your story, grabbed@nightlightastrology.com. Just don't email us or share anything that you don't mind us resharing in a future episode. Transcripts of any of the daily talks can be found on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. And we have just a couple of days on Saturday this week. The new class, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic, my first year program, begins again. Click on the first year course to learn more about it. There are 30 classes on the year. They're all held via live webinar. They're all recorded, so you can participate remotely at your own pace, or you can attend live during the webinars. They are all 2 to 3 hours each. 30 classes on the year. In between major units of the curriculum, we have breakout study sessions led by our staff that are just bonus for you if you want to attend and get a little extra help. There's an interactive group forum discussion that's also staffed by tutors year-round, so you have a lot of support. There is a ton of bonus material included in the program, allowing you to go as deeply as you want to. Maybe your intention is nothing more than hobby-level interest. This is just something you're doing for yourself, for your own spiritual growth. Or maybe it's something you want to do professionally. Maybe you'd like to read charts for other people, part-time or full-time. Getting started with the first year program is a great way to start that journey. At the bottom, you'll find enrollment options. You have an early bird payment, saves you $500 off. There's a 12-month payment plan. You can spread out the tuition over a year. And then we do still have need-based tuition contracts available. So coming into this weekend, if you're someone who's like, I really want to join this class, I need a little bit of help to make it happen financially, use the tuition assistance. We'd be glad to help you out. That is there to make sure that nobody's priced out of studying a sacred subject. So on that note, let us now turn our attention to the cycle of Mars. So I took it back to the beginning of the last synodic cycle, which we're going to revisit. But actually, let me just reset this so that we're actually going to start with where we are right now. Here we go. Now, we'll share again. So here is the upcoming conjunction between Mars and the Sun. It's called when a planet crosses over the same degree as the Sun, or the Sun crosses the same degree as another planet, depending on who's faster. You get something called Cazimi. There they are. And that happens when the Sun occupies the same degree as another planet. The planet is said to be situated at the heart of the Sun, or it's seated as though it is temporarily on the throne of the king or queen. So this Cazimi is coming up on Friday, November 17th, and it lasts a few days. So you're going to see it kind of, if you take it out to about the same degree, it starts kind of on Thursday, where they're occupying the same degree. And even you can sort of see that, oops, here we go. So they actually enter the same degree here on Wednesday of this week. And then if you just kind of scoot it along a little bit, you'll see that they actually end up conjoined Thursday into Friday. And then finally, the Sun passes over by Saturday morning. So you have Wednesday through Saturday where you're really going to be experiencing that conjunction of the Sun and Mars. And that is the reset of Mars's synodic cycle with the sun. And it's this very empowered moment called a Cazimi. Now, the other interesting feature of this that we'll discuss is the fact that Mars is in its own sign, which means that it is in its own chariot. That also protects it from something that happens when a planet approaches very close to the sun in conjunction, which is called combustion. It means that the planet is getting sort of burnt up. And so as a result of that burning up, you have a very powerful quality of the planet sort of dying. But when the planet is in its own sign, it's protected from that. And so that changes things just a little bit. So that's going to figure into how we talk about this as well. We'll come back to. So before we continue on and look at the actual moment of the Cazimi and all that it means, I think it's important to place this within the larger process of Mars's synodic cycle. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually remove everything on the screen that you're looking at except for the sun and Mars. And in this way, we can trace out the entire cycle of Mars and the sun so you can understand the pattern that the cycle brings. So this is effectively like the new moon of the Mars-Sun cycle. The sun has a planetary cycle with every planet called its synodic cycle. And when we look at that cycle, there are very distinct moments that have archetypal significance to them. And the conjunction is very much like a new moon. You think about it like the seeding moment of a new cycle. So that's what makes this Mars Cazimi this week exciting, is that we have a new way of being for Mars. We have a new way of we have a new cycle with new themes that are about to start emerging from the seeding of this moment. And we're going to talk about how to interpret that and what it might mean for you in a little bit. But first, let's show you what the synodic cycle looks like. So if we take it forward from this point, what's going to happen is the sun and Mars are going to start separating. And you'll see the sun goes out in front of Mars because it moves faster than Mars. As the planets are separating very gradually from the moment of their conjunction, you're going to get to a space where eventually the two planets are in something like a trine. It'll be whole sign. It's approximate, not exact. But notice here that by the time the sun in November of 2024 gets into Sagittarius, it's now creating a trine with Mars. And that trine is always going to happen right around the time when Mars is going to station and turn retrograde. So watch what happens now to Mars. Go forward just a little bit after that, and there you see it. Here is Mars stationing in the sign of Leo. Now, that station point is going to be like a very important critical turning point for Mars within the greater synodic cycle. What happens from this point forward is Mars goes retrograde, and then the sun and Mars are going to move into an opposition with each other. You can see this happening if we go back just a little bit. Here they are moving through the opposition now. This is in January of 2025 that the two planets will be opposed while Mars is retrograde. And this is sort of like the full moon of the cycle, where the seeding themes will manifest in some very powerful ways. So you can see this right now. This is in the early part of 2025 that the two planets are opposed after Mars has turned retrograde. Now, if we keep moving this forward, we're going to see that the next thing that happens in the cycle is that the two planets will once again come into a trine configuration. And that you can see right here doesn't have to be exact by degree. It can be by whole sign. So you'll see the sun is in a water sign of Pisces. Mars is retrograding through Cancer. And all of a sudden, we have that whole sign trine again. And watch what happens to Mars. You're going to notice that as that trine approaches, Mars is stationing. And Mars will then turn direct. This is sort of like a third quarter moon, you could say. It's sort of like the turning point toward the end of the cycle. And from this point, the sun will keep moving along, and see how it's closing in on Mars now. And the next point in the cycle, see how the sun and Mars are back in Scorpio. It's going to advance to the next sign. And here we have the two of them coming together. At this point, it'll be, looks like late Capricorn by the time they come together. So this will be in January of 2026. So we are starting in this cycle here in November of 2023, and it will be about a little, I guess, less than 3 years. So you have all the way from now until the early part of 2026. I guess that's what, 2 years and change before the two planets will conjoin again and a new cycle will commence. These are like elaborate, you could think of it as like an elaborate moon cycle for Mars. And so the seeding point and the full moon point during the retrograde are super important. Now, I want to take you back in time, and let's go backward and revisit where we've been since Mars's synodic cycle began most recently. So we're going to take this back, and here they are. So if we go backward just a little bit, we're going to notice that the two planets are coming together right about here on October 8th of 2021. So if you look at the whole sign house of Libra in your birth chart, you will notice that you can track the cycle according to the seeding point. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what features the cycle brings and how you notice it symbolically. But you could start by looking at the whole sign house of Libra and thinking about what kinds of developments have been happening in that house since October of 2021. That's a really fascinating way of looking at it. So now you will notice, if we track this out, that a very significant turning point would have been the full moon of this cycle. I bet you can guess where that was. So we take this along and notice that the two planets come into a trine with one another while Mars is in Gemini. And this was in the fall of last year. What happened after the two planets moved through the trine was that Mars slowed down, stationed, and turned retrograde in Gemini. At which point, the full moon of the cycle occurred while Mars was retrograde and opposite the Sun, which happened in early December of last year. Very important, critical, full moon-like moment for the Mars cycle. Now, I think that's really fascinating. If you track it out, again, you could look at the whole sign house of Gemini for the full moon moment and the seeding moment in the house of Libra. There's a lot of ways that you can play with it. But what you're really thinking about is, how is your relationship with the archetypal principle of Mars developing and changing along these timelines? So start by looking at the fall of 2021 and think about around December of 2022 as a sort of new and full moon moment for Mars in your life. In the most recent cycle, it's sometimes we don't think that Mars has a new or a full moon, but it does. And you can track those out with great effectiveness. I have told you guys a little bit on my channel about the some of the personal health journey that I have that I've been on, and those two moments track out with a time that I started regular resistance training at the gym, and then another period, the full moon period, while Mars was retrograde in Gemini, when I started undergoing a pretty significant physical transformation, and some new aspects of my health regimen were sort of being installed. So it's amazing if you take the time to track where Mars has been during those periods for yourself. Think again, fall 2021, and then December of 2022 as a sort of new and full moon moment. And you'll find that Mars stuff is popping around those times. And then you could plug in the topics of the whole sign houses if you wanted to. So we have a seeding point, and the seeding point is sometimes more obscure than the full moon moment during the Mars retrograde, which is often quite obvious. Just in the same way that when a woman becomes pregnant in the beginning, it's not so obvious, but by the full moon, you can see because her belly is big. And so the full moon is really when the fruit is appearing, and the manifestation of the fruit is visible. And that is not going to be for some time. So if we look at the moment that we're in now, remember, it wasn't until January of, oh, wait, no, I'm sorry. Let's go to the full moon moment during the Mars retrograde. So here's our seeding moment that we have coming up right now. And then if we take this forward, let's take a look at how things develop. I'm going to push this along until we get to our, here we go. So now Mars is retrograde. And the full moon moment that we're looking at will be January of 2025. So you're thinking late November, right now, 2023, we get the seeding point, followed in January of 2025 by this kind of full moon moment, the ripening of the fruit kind of making its manifesting. That's going to be a really interesting one, considering that at that time, Mars will also be debilitated in the sign of Cancer. And so there's, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a retrograde that we're spending a lot of time talking about when you have a very challenging placement for Mars in the full moon of this upcoming cycle. So that's a little bit of education about the synodic cycle. I hope you find that useful. And now what I want to do is shift our attention to this Mars Cazimi that's coming up this week and what you can expect from it. First and foremost is a new beginning rooted in Mars Sun symbolism. So what is that symbolism? Well, first of all, again, it's a seeding point. It's the start of something new. And I would start by saying that the sun always is representing the ambitions, desires, and ideal images toward which our actions move. So anytime you think of the sun, you think of kind of like a golden image of success, beauty, truth, perfection, like a Platonic ideal living in the mind of God. And that kind of idealism inspires us. When you see a really great musician playing and you play the same instrument, like for me, I'm not much of a guitar player, but when I see someone who plays guitar that's really, really amazing, I think of them as I start thinking of them as like an ideal image. I'd like to be able to play like that. And they, in turn, will tell you, if you listen to interviews with great musicians, they'll tell you who they aspired to be like when they were learning. And on like that it goes. And in this world, so much of what drives us in our ambitions, our desires, our intentions, what drives the plot line of our stories forward is something we desire. And the thing we desire is an image of beauty or perfection or completion or happiness or truth. Those are solar things. So when the sun and Mars combine, we're talking about the ideal images that drive our lives forward, that propel the plot lines of our life, that are Mars-like. Power, strength, courage, determination. When you think about all of the most virtuous sides of Mars, you're thinking about, how can I be strong? How can I win at the right things? How can I be an example of strength and virtue, like a noble warrior or a noble knight or something like that. But it's also about, how can I be effective? How can I get things done? What actions constitute the strongest and most ideal actions? When the sun infuses itself into Mars, we get new images of masculinity. And that could be, new images of Mars is another way of putting it. It doesn't have to be masculine in any strict sense of gender or identity, right? Just strong yang might be another way of putting it. What does that look like? And that could look very different from, someone who's into physical things versus intellectual things versus political or religious, inspirations. Maybe their strength looks different for, a 7-year-old girl than it does a 75-year-old man. It's very, you could think about all of the different images that constitute strength, power, and courage. And then you also have the shadows of Mars, which will be new forms of conflict, new adventures that take us into the shadows of war, violence, domination, hostility, where we may have to learn healthy boundaries or advocacy or standing up for ourselves. So there are multiple levels at which the conjunction between the Sun and Mars can work. But you think fundamentally of a new beginning that is rooted in new ideal images of Mars. And sometimes when things, there's a way in which this seeding can be taking place very unconsciously. And so that process may guide us into a confrontation, it's a very Mars word, with the shadows of the new Mars image we're trying to cultivate. I want to be powerful. Okay, well, what is at work in that desire that may be a shadow? I want to be, confident and stronger than all the rest. I want to be victorious. Okay, well, there might be some real issues there with the ego. And so these seeds can be planted in ways that are somewhat unconscious. They're not, it's not like we're all just out there in the sunny world planting a seed right now that we're well aware of what we're planting. And it's my intention that I breathed into my yoga class today. It's rarely like that. The seed that's being planted is a matter of what we're doing, how we're responding, the motivations and drives that are guiding us instinctually, sometimes in very unconscious ways right now, in the next week, already in the last week or two, as Mars and the Sun have come closer. For many of us, this will be an amazing opportunity to refine what it means to be strong or Mars-like, to be effective and powerful, to feel sovereign and independent, to individuate and become more self-reliant or self-sufficient. This will be the seeding of a new cycle that for many of us will deliver some really wonderful results. We can truly become stronger, more independent, well-boundaried people, know how to take care of ourselves, who have faced fears. And for others, there's going to be lessons. They might be very humbling. There may be lessons about the shadows of Mars in our lives: anger, hostility, conflict, power, domination. So either way, though, this is the new cycle, and it's starting very shortly. So paying attention to what's going on right now, raising consciousness and awareness about what's happening is advised. Not to control things, but to pay attention and to be careful with our responses. Number 2 would be a moment of empowered action, will, and power. So, aside from the beginning of a new cycle that's process-oriented, we also have a moment that in and of itself can be about the tremendous empowerment. Like you're taking Mars and you're infusing it with the power of the Sun. And so you may just notice that there are some very bold, empowered actions, that the willpower is coming through strongly this week, and that questions of power or power dynamics or power struggles are amplified. Relationships with authority and power may be amplified this week. And then number 3 is a state of Mars possession. I'll never forget that when my understanding of what some of the ancient astrologers said about Cazimi really shifted. And some of you were actually here when this happened, watching the channel. But some years ago, I had a viewer who had a very, very serious, mental health crisis. And they, had we might call like a decompensation, where they had like a very intense series of events that happened to them. And I'm no mental health expert, so I'm just putting this the only way I know how to. And they, they thought, they were in the comments section. This was live in front of lots of people here too. They believed that they were the reincarnation of Jesus, and that I was to use this platform for all of this stuff. And this was a Mercury Cazimi. and they ended up taking their own life. And I found out about this through connections in social media, that this had happened to this person. So we had tried to reach out to see if there was someone who could support this person, and then we found out. And that happened during a Mercury Cazimi, where the Mercury's at the heart of the sun, and this person believed that they were an empowered prophet, basically, and it was really, really sad and really, really challenging experience. And the way that shifted my understanding of Cazimis is that ancient astrologers would sometimes talk about planets at the heart of the sun as though sort of possessed by the solar power. So when Mars comes at the heart of the sun, one thing that can happen is people can get like a God complex, especially with respect to power and displays of power and might and strength. Like, God is instructing me to be a bully. Do you know what I'm saying? Or God is telling me that I have to inflict harm, or I have to, exact some kind of martial punishment or expression towards someone or something because I have this kind of solar righteousness. So you do have to be careful, because for some people, Mars at the heart of the sun will be a moment of sort of a little bit of like a deranged Mars empowerment. And of course, that could be really extreme, but oftentimes it's nothing more than feeling like self-righteous and becoming a bit of a bully, becoming or just overestimating your strength in a situation, or thinking that, some higher power has given you the authority to, act in a way that's, maybe very domineering. So you do have to be careful of that. On the other hand, the Mars possession thing is interesting, because sometimes in like much more constructive ways, that Mars sun energy comes through, and it's just like empowering, emboldening, and sort of, it's just like Mars is being fueled by this nuclear solar power and giving you the courage and conviction to like go and do something difficult. I can do a hard thing and just, but that's similarly like you're sort of being possessed by a Mars muse, like a Mars daimon that's coming through and just heating you up. That could be very effective. You could get some really nice things done, or maybe confront some things that are difficult, or have an emotional breakthrough or a moment of healing. Just be careful. This is a very powerful moment for Mars. And when it gets infused with the light of the sun, that kind of golden tint that can make you think that it's okay to be a jerk. So we just have to be careful about that. Anyway, these are some things to watch for as Mars and the sun come together here by the end of the week, placed within the larger context. Don't forget, look at the whole sign house of Scorpio in your birth chart. The topics of that house may be the seeding point for the new cycle. And sometimes they won't show up as much, but just note what's really taking place at this point. And then we'll track it to January 2025 when we reach that full moon moment. We'll be looking back at this. I'll be saying, remember, this cycle started in November of 2023. What was happening back then? Take notes. It helps. If you have an astrological journal, you'll learn 10 times more, and you'll retain a lot more of what you're learning every day if you consume astrology. If you just keep even a little journal where you just make a note, Mars Cazimi this week, these were some of the Mars things I experienced. You bring that notebook to January of 2025, and you're going to be in position to receive some of the fruits of the cycle in a way that a lot of people aren't, not because they're not worthy of learning or they're not smart, but because they're not remembering where the cycle began, because it's a different period of time. And we don't have, it's easier to track lunar cycles, because we're all conscious of it, and a lot of the YouTube channels are doing it and stuff like that. But Mars cycles, we forget to track them. They're just as important. So that's it for today. I hope you guys are having a good one, and that this conversation was useful. And I will look forward to talking with you all more tomorrow. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.